Hello there and welcome. I'm Ole Brøgger, and if you're new here, I really hope I'll earn your subscription today. But before you subscribe, this is the last episode of my temple build. So I think you should go and look at the link up here and start at episode 1, because a lot of things have happened since I started this build. In this build, we are going to build a full basement with catacombs and dungeons under the temple. I bought this huge chunk of EPS styrofoam. This is a very bad building material for model building, but I'm only going to use this to raise up the garden around the temple. It is suitable enough. I'm just gonna paint it and that's pretty much it. It won't be visible, it's just a razor. I also got some army painter foam over here, and I have some of the blue foam here. The army painter foam is for the floor and this is for the walls. There's a lot of work ahead of us. We better get started. First, I'll need to cut up this big board of foam. It is a very cheap foam. It cost me about €3. That's approximately the same in dollars. Since I'm not gonna mold anything of this foam, it is very suitable to just raise up the garden of the temple. This cutout will be for a small compartment below the garden, and this is actually the only thing I will make below the garden, but maybe in the future I will have this prepared for other compartments if I need it for my campaign, but for now this will be the only one. Now I'll need to cut out a lot of the white foam from the army painter. I will have to lay out the grid, and this will match the layout of the temple, so the basement will be 1-to-1 of the temple size and shape. I will need 2 rooms that is 10 by 12 inches and one that is 10 by 10, and then we have the hallways, and 2 of those is 3 by 10. And finally, I will need the 2 side building. There will be a basement under them as well, and they are 5 by 10. I will need a more rough texture on the basement tiles. So, for the first time, Mr. Rock here will see some action in this temple build. All the base tiles is now ready. It took me a whole day to make these, but I'm pretty satisfied with the result. So now we need to build some walls. And I will use the blue foam as I did on the walls on the temple. But for the basement, I don't want some fine bricks. I want something that looks more rough, as this is the part of the old temple that was here before the new temple was built on top of it. So I went into Inkscape and made this nice pattern of some bricks that was uneven and layered differently. And after a lot of tests, I finally got my laser tuned in with the lowest power and the fastest speed that I was capable of getting a pretty nice result. It took about 20 minutes on each side of the foam to get this engraving, and I think it looks awesome. I figured out that I needed 3 of these boards to have enough for all my walls. I will slice them up into sections of 4 centimeter tall walls. This is about 1.5 inch. I also need some posts between the wall sections, and I cut up some more foam, and it was in 10 millimeters by 12 millimeters, just to give it some more depth. I will put a post in every 2nd inch tile. But before I will cut up the sections, I will use this tinfoil ball to give it some more texture. And now I can start cutting up the sections. I'll also need some posts for the corners, and for this I will use this pink foam and cut some posts that are 12 by 12 millimeters. The reason why I chose the pink is just so I can tell the difference between them, and I don't have to think about where to put each post. I used some hot glue to attach all the elements of the walls. In the beginning I used PVA glue, but it was not stable enough so I could hold it in position, and I would have needed some needles to hold it or something, and it didn't work out. So hot glue it is, and it works perfectly. I did a new door design and I used my laser cutter. These are more simple and they won't be able to open. This will make them a lot more sturdy in gameplay, and the door will just be removable from the board. I made a left and a right part and I will just glue them together. I attached some small wall sections on the sides of the door and then they can just slide in. I try to make a standard size for each wall element, some with doors and some without. These basement elements will be so versatile that I can actually use them as huge dungeon tiles in the future. These will not only be for this temple, but I can do all sorts of setups with dungeons, and I think I will make some minor dungeon tiles that will work with this setup in the future. But this was only the first of 7 tiles, so there's a lot of work to be done, and I made some more walls. My laser cutter just started to shut down while it was engraving this, so I had to remake one of the boards. And then I thought maybe I can actually save this. So I used a pencil to redraw what the laser missed, and then I actually found out how long it would take me to do all these boards by hand. This fix took me almost half an hour. Now I'm just more happy that I have this laser and it will speed up my building process. Now I just need to give it some texture with some curled up tinfoil. The doors under the hallways will not have a side wall. They will just slide in this slot. This is the leftover wall sections, and I will definitely save those for future builds. Last thing I need to build is this small section that I cut out from the razors, and I will just put some interior walls and floor into that. All the wall sections is now done, and I wanted to see how it looked under the temple. I went back to my laser and made these arches. These are for the catacombs under the prayer halls, and I needed them to be double-sided, and that was a bit of a challenge to hit the laser exactly on the opposite side. After I engraved one side, I put a small nail through the foam to make a mark on the opposite side so I could adjust the laser to hit exactly where I needed it to be. And all these arches also got a treatment with the tinfoil ball. And they had some very sharp lines and it was pretty easy to cut them out by hand. And then I glued them in with some hot glue, and they will work as separators for 6 sections of the catacombs. For all the wall and door sections that are removable, I will install some magnets just to make sure that they will stay where I need them to be. In the 2 hallways, I will need to do some modifications because I need some stairs so it's possible to enter the basement. I'll need to cut out 2 sections of these floor tiles, and I'll use my Proxon to make the cutout. I'll have to glue it back together and repaint some parts of it. To make the stairs, I will cut out some 1-inch wide foam, and the steps will be 1 centimeter long. I will need 4 parts to make a complete staircase. The hallways next to the raised prayer hall is made by 3 layers of foam, and it is very thick to work with, so I will need to make another cutout in the bottom of this hallway. I'll also need to make some brick texture and roughen it up with some curled up tinfoil. I made these stairs permanent, built into the thick layer of the hallway. This is to support the underlying staircase below in the basement. Now I just need to glue in the section I cut out and fill in the gaps with some green putty. And here you can see how the 2 levels will work together. This is the lab section, and I thought it might be a good idea to have a staircase in here as well, just to make an extension for the lab in the basement. I couldn't use my Proxon without destroying too much of the wall sections, so I had to do this manually with my X-Acto knife. I also needed some railings around the staircase, so I cut out some of these 3mm wooden dowels, glued them together with some super glue, and then we have a railing. I'll use some mud podge to cover all the foam that I installed in the existing parts of the temple. I'll also need to prime all these foam parts. First up is all the razor sections. This will just be a simple paint job. On top I will use the wilderness and woodland, and the sides will be hit with some ruins and cliffs. For all the tile parts it will be just the ruins and cliffs. I actually used a whole can on this because there's so much to paint. And while I was waiting for the paint to dry, I started to prime some 3D prints of some sarcophagus. I'll need some more scatter terrain for this build, and I wanted this to be below the lab to support the tanks on top of it. The one, you know, with the goblin and the tadpole. I wanted some bigger tanks just to support that. I cut it out of a small foam ball, and I used some plastic straws to function as pipes. Some green putty and a wet brush to smooth things out. After the green putty was dry, I used a sand stick to smooth the final things out. I could have made a 3D design and printed this, but I think this is more fun and challenging just to do things yourself. And finally I gave it a layer of Mod Podge. All the base coating of the foam is now dry, and there's a lot of dry brushing ahead, and I spent almost a whole day just dry brushing all these parts. This is my homemade wash. It is just water mixed with dish soap and some brown and black paint. But to give it more flow, I put in some of my airbrush thinner, and I think this works pretty well. It improves the flow, and I think it turns out pretty good. And while the wash dries up, I can paint the tanks I need for the basement. I used some of the Army Painter's new metallic paints, and this is the true copper. In the garden episode of the temple, I prepared a small cutout, and now I'll just need to cut out the piece of grass, put some paint in the hole, put back in the piece of grass, and put a statue on top, and we have a secret entrance to the basement. I dry brushed the stairs and walls with a light grey just to make them pop. And one final thing I need is a centerpiece below the teleportation device. When I built the teleportation device in the observatory, I bought 2 of these glass balls, and I will just put it on top of one of these electronic candles. But we just gotta fix something about that hole in the top. I also have these leftovers from the platforms, and I think I'm just gonna use some of them and glue them on here on the side. We can't have a white electronic candle, so I think I'll just give it a nice coat of this death metal. And while we wait for it to dry, I will try to put some UV resin into the hole in the top. I'll just put in a few drops and hit it with my UV laser. This took a while because I have to build up the layers until the hole is just completely shut. Now the paint is dry, I can use some super glue to glue in the ball on top of the LED. I really had some problems gluing in the laser cut parts because apparently the paint didn't stick very well on this candle, and the super glue just pulled off the paint and I couldn't make it stick. So I just had to scrape off the paint and glue it on the candle and finish it up with some more paint. I'm done with this project. The temple is done, and I spent 4.5 months on this project, and I still have ideas how to improve stuff, and the final few things I needed to do, it went a bit quick, but I also had to be done with it and get it ready to play. I've come up with a great story around the temple in my campaign. Sometimes stuff will happen there and it will work as a hub for the players, where they can always return using the teleportation device and all that kind of stuff. But I also made a one-shot, which I'm so excited about. Here in the fall, I will have the first gameplay on my table. Actually, the first Dungeons and Dragons play on my table I built last winter. And I'm just so excited about all this. And yeah, it went a bit quick with this one, but I think it actually works. And yeah, it works. But let me give you a full tour of how the temple is set up, show you around and some different kinds of possible scenarios. I don't know how my players will act when I introduce this temple to them. Here are all the parts for the temple. It took me 7 minutes to make a complete setup for this one shot. And yeah, I know it's first gonna be in the fall, but right now I just want to show you how easy it is to set up. The next problem I have to think about is storage. I'm almost running out of room to store this because this is not the only thing that's going to be in this table in the future. And the setup is almost done. I'm going to give you a walkthrough like a silent movie with a story where you can imagine the dialogue. So let's go. Thank you so much for watching this to the end. I really appreciate you all being here. And if you think I've earned it, please hit that subscribe button and maybe the notification button below, because there's some new stuff here on YouTube that will support me if you hit that top bell icon. And maybe like and throw a comment. That would really be awesome if you would like to comment on this. This was the final build of the temple, and I gotta move on and make some new stuff. But this is it for now. Goodbye.